Welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. You've got Logan Jones and Evan Knowles recording out of the Sales River studio today. And we've got some great stories to go over. Two about AI again. Just so many stories coming out about AI. Makes it difficult to keep up with, but we're trying our best. And then we're also talking about the second biggest bank failure since 2008, First Republic Bank failing. So we'll be talking about all three of those stories, as well as a cool new ChatGPT plugin in our AI Edge series. But we got the Derby coming up tomorrow, which is exciting. I haven't looked at it yet to really study and know who I'm going to pick. I'll probably dive in sometime tonight or tomorrow morning. But any plans for it? What are you doing?
My family always gets together with family friends and throws a little Derby party, so we're probably going to do that.
I think I'm going to be going out to Keeneland, which is always a good time. Go out there and have all the races on the TVs and spend some time with friends. So anyway, before we dive in, please remember to follow us on all socials at Middle Tech Pod. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can stay up to date with the latest videos and episodes of Middle Tech. And before we dive in, we just want to get a quick word from our sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation is currently accepting applications for its SBIR STTR Matching Funds Program. Kentucky's program is a national trendsetter for providing critical non-dilutive capital to support the high-tech research, development, and commercialization of novel ideas within the Commonwealth. SBIR matching funds have directly contributed to the creation of more than 700 jobs, more than 200 patents filed, and more than $160 million raised in private follow-on funding into dozens of companies relocating to the state. The matching funds application window is open through April 24th. To apply and learn more about support services for companies that want to explore SBIR STTR grants and contracts, visit kyinnovation.com/SBIR. Middle Tech is sponsored by Bolt Marketing. Take your website to the next level with a website that's built to work. At Bolt Marketing, they're revolutionizing websites for small businesses that are affordable, customizable, and hassle-free. Whether you have a construction company, a boutique clothing store, or you own a hot yoga studio, they have options for you. Click the link in our show notes to explore their marketing options that can transform your marketing and grow your business. And as a personal note, Bolt Marketing built our website, and they were awesome to work with throughout the entire process. We highly recommend working with them. All right, so for this first story, we have the Whitehouse scheduled a meeting with some of the top executives from the top AI companies right now. So Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, all of them are getting together to talk to the White House about making sure that AI is safe. So this is likely the first step in getting regulation going for artificial intelligence, which is going to be a crucial part to making sure that this is a successful technology and not harmful to society. So Evan, give us the rundown on what's going on at the White House.
Yeah, so governments around the world are starting to take AI a lot more seriously, and the White House is no exception. So the UK and the United States are kind of moving faster than some other countries. Europe is being a little bit more strict and putting in policy pretty quickly, but the United States, I think, is taking a bit more of a diligent approach, talking with CEOs before they make these changes. As he mentioned, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic, which was a kind of a spin out of OpenAI, are now all getting together with the president. Last week, Elon met with members of Congress, so people are really concerned about this. Many employees at Google are leaving out of concern. The quote-unquote godfather of AI left Google out of his concern for safety, and people like Elon are trying to build competitors to OpenAI and Google that are less biased and have more safety measures put in place. So again, governments and private companies are taking notice of the potential, of course, of the good, but especially the bad here. And I think it's really important for these CEOs to step up and speak with the government, because I don't know if the government is really capable of having constructive discussions about this. They just don't have the knowledge. And so it's really important that these CEOs come together. One thing that I think came out this week as well that's pertinent to this story is the CEO of now Google's AI lab, who was the founder of DeepMind, which did the AlphaGo challenge. He came out and said that he thinks AGI is going to happen within the next few years, just 2, 3, 4 years. And that's really, really crazy thing to hear from a CEO of that of that level saying that, because AGI has been something that's written about, in fiction books forever, and to say that that's now within grasp within the next couple of years is a big deal.
Yeah. I think it's just important that, these CEOs are the ones that are kind of leading the conversation with the White House, just because it's such a cutting edge technology. It's nothing like we've ever dealt with before, something that's truly net new. So I think my only thought about this really is that they seem to be going about it in the right way. I would hate to see the government trying to make regulations without including some of the top thought leaders in the space. So we'll see what comes out of this. But it's good to see that these types of meetings are beginning to happen, and I hope we continue to stay updated about them.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to see on this is a little bit more diversity in who is in the meeting. These are all CEOs who are CEOs of public companies mostly, and private companies, but they're all mostly driven by profits. OpenAI switched from a nonprofit to needing to have profits, even though it's a capped model. Google and Microsoft, of course, are public companies that have shareholders that they're trying to drive profits for, and have this group of people that are CEOs trying to drive profits. Their answers might be biased in what they're giving as far as information to the government as far as how to regulate it. So I think they need to have people that have more diverse governance and business entities and research backgrounds, so that they're not just talking to people that have an incentive for letting this thing loose and driving as much profits as possible. Because that's ultimately what I think is going to lead to many bad things happening, is the chase of profits with something this intelligent could displace many parts of the economy faster than we can figure out how to kind of hedge on that destruction. So that's one criticism I think I have for seeing this meeting. Yeah,
that's a great criticism, and that honestly is a great transition into this next story about AI, which is IBM is planning to freeze hiring as the CEO expects AI to replace 7,800 jobs. So we're starting to see this happen across different tech companies and just companies broadly. I forget which company it was that said that they laid off around 3,000 employees. Do you remember? That was a story that came
Box.
Yeah.
Or Dropbox. One of the
Dropbox. That's it. Dropbox. So we're starting to see this actually play out. It's no longer us talking about AI taking jobs. Now it's actually playing out. Like Evan just mentioned, Dropbox was the company that said that around 3,000 employees are likely going to be displaced by AI. And now IBM is saying they're going to hire or freeze hiring because they expect AI to take over these jobs as well. So give us some of the details around this article, and I think this is mostly something for us to discuss how this is actually going to take place and what it means for employees that might be at risk of losing their jobs.
Yeah, so the jobs like in this discussion are non-customer facing jobs. So there are things happening in the back office. There's people that are negotiating contracts, procurement, HR, back office accounting jobs. These are things that aren't customer facing that are being replaced. The CEO of IBM said he could easily see about a third of the company's non-facing roles being replaced. So that's 26,000 workers that they have that are currently non-customer facing roles that he thinks can be replaced. And easily, he said, that would happen over a 5-year period. So there's an urgency to this, and 5 years is not a long time when you think about scaling that amount of jobs across other similar sized companies. That's pretty scary for the economy. And so this is not going to be a trend that's going to slow down. It's going to be speeding up. Many companies, now that the economy is starting to move towards a recession, are already laying people off. And then they're going to have to figure out how to remain efficient and drive just as much profit if possible as before with less people, because they have to reduce their expense base. And what they're going to do to make that happen is implement more AI and automation. And so it's really kind of a bad time for AI, I think, to go mainstream when we're going into a recession, because you naturally have job loss and companies cutting expenses, and then you drop AI on them to, fill in the void there. And then when the economy picks back up, are those people going to be rehired? Probably not, because AI is infinitely scalable and infinitely more intelligent than humans in those non-facing repetitive roles. So it's kind of a double whammy for human employment.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I wanted to call out here on these notes that we have is that Walmart has been using AI to negotiate contracts with suppliers, and apparently 75% of suppliers have apparently told the company that they prefer to negotiate with a machine instead of a human. And that kind of gets me thinking, why is that? And that's just because, one, these chatbots, you don't have to send an email and then wait a day for a response. There's no emotion involved with it. It's straight logic and facts back and forth with it. And that made me think, okay, well, what's the next iteration of that? How do these jobs actually get replaced at scale? I think eventually you're going to have these AI bots that are trained on a specific role for a specific company, and they have all the information they need. And then it's just the AI bots talking back and forth to each other, and things are happening at in a fraction of the time and for a fraction of the cost. I think that's the manifestation of what this actually looks like into the future. And then, that's when you start getting into conversations around universal basic income and, where does our economy go when we have, all of these workers that are being displaced by artificial intelligence. Yeah. So, that's a whole nother discussion.
We've been talking about what this does to jobs in the economy, and, like I said, those repetitive jobs that people do that don't necessarily take a whole lot of creativity or really intelligence to do, those are going to be wiped out. And I'm really not sure what is going to replace those. So, there's kind of two schools of thought when it comes to AI and jobs, and it's really that AI is going to allow people to have more bandwidth to do more work and take off the repetitive task. But if somebody's job is solely around a repetitive task, doesn't take any, again, creativity or intelligence, they're going to be gone. And that's a really large portion of the economy, unfortunately. And we're going to have to figure out net new jobs to fill that hole for our economy, or we're going to have to figure out something to do with all of those unemployed people. There are some jobs where AI will come in and make people a lot more productive and make the demand for those jobs increase, I think, in the short term, for like sure. Development. You can take a developer and make a decent developer, maybe a 10x developer, and their output increases. And so a company might want to hire more and move faster because they have that ability to move faster and be more productive. But there's still a large section of the economy that is going to disappear. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but I think the government really needs to be thinking very deeply about it. And I'm not sure anybody really can foresee what's going to happen.
Oh, there'll definitely be a gap from the time when this happens and the jobs are replaced. Who knows how long that gap will be? Years, I think, for sure, until we figure out what those additional roles are going to be. But it's not going to be as gradual of a transition as like the invention of electricity or some of these other paradigm shifting occurrences that have happened that have really propelled our society forward or our economy forward. This is something that is happening so fast right now that there's going to be, I think, a gap between the jobs being replaced and us, or the jobs being taken over by AI and us replacing them. So it'll be interesting to watch how it plays out. But the reason we're talking about these stories so much is because this is moving so fast. That's kind of the point of why we're talking about AI so much on this podcast, is because the news coming out about it and the advancements with the technology is happening at an incredible speed. It's difficult for us to keep up with it. Just imagine how our parents feel, or how some of these senior government officials feel. So anyway, any other points to add to that story before we move on to talking about First Republic Bank?
Nope.
So we sat down with Michael Lewis whenever Silicon Valley Bank collapsed back in March, and we got into a detailed discussion about why that collapsed, what the fallout was going to look like from that. And we are now seeing another bank failure that is largely in part, I believe, due to the Silicon Valley Bank failure. So First Republic Bank, the second largest bank failure since 2008, shut down last, let's see, when did it shut down? Last Monday, I guess. Give us some details around this story. Let's dive into why this happened, what this could potentially mean going forward, and the aftermath.
Yeah, so First Republic Bank had an earnings call, the public company here, and they had an earnings call where they said about $100 billion worth of deposits were taken out of the bank since mid-March, and that's a lot. So that's a bank run. So people panicked, stock tanked, and the bank failed, and it was seized by the government, and then it was sold to JP Morgan Chase to basically save depositors and keep the bank running. So the bank had $92 billion in deposits and $203 billion in loans and other securities. So what ended up happening here was, like Logan said, Silicon Valley Bank failed largely because of unrealized losses, bad investments that because of interest rates rising, they became losses. And a similar thing happened at First Republic, but the real thing that happened was the First Republic Bank was focused on really wealthy people who had large deposits, who had well above the FDIC insurance, basically policy of $250,000. So they had a lot of uninsured deposits. And when people saw Silicon Valley Bank fail and go under, a lot of those wealthy people smartly started to withdraw their money and put it into other banks because those uninsured deposits were no longer safe. So this was kind of a domino effect. Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of JP Morgan, says that this is likely the end of it. He doesn't see many more failing from this point on, that unless interest rates really continue to go up rapidly, he thinks this is the end of kind of this banking crisis. And so why don't you pull up that photo here of an image that shows 2008 to 2009 and compares it to the size of banks today. And so what you're looking at here is in 2008, 2009, you can see a bunch of banks, about 500 something banks failed during that period of time. And they failed for a few reasons, mostly because of overexposure to the real estate industry and having really bad mortgages and underwriting mortgages that should never have been underwritten. And so when the real estate market got overheated and there was a bubble and those mortgages started to fail and people weren't paying their mortgages, those banks really had a lot of losses and really basically had to default. And that was a big reason you saw so many banks. The volume of banks, the number of banks in 2008, 2009 is much higher than this quote-unquote banking crisis. But the difference is now the banks are much larger because we're seeing an issue with unrealized losses, but also uninsured deposits. So the large banks here who cater to very wealthy people or businesses have a ton of deposits, and they're very large banks because of those large deposits. So it's kind of two different things you're seeing here. It's very clear the differences, but it's just kind of a unique comparison to show that we've had three failures, but the number of the size of the deposits and the size of the banks are much larger than in 2008. And again, it's for different reasons. So I thought this was a unique graph to show about the differences between the two banking crises. Because everybody was exposed to mortgages in 2008. Very few banks today are exposed to this FDI insurance kind of misalignment with depositors. But unrealized losses are happening across the banking industry. It's just some are more exposed because of those unrealized losses to bank runs.
Yeah, man, these past 3 years are going to be a doozy for our kids to read in the history books. When you think about COVID hits, interest rates plummet to basically zero. There's way too much money in the economy. And then you start seeing things like this happen when the banks had to make essentially riskier investments into the bonds just to try and find a return. Then the inflation hits. You start cranking up the interest rate again. These banks have these huge unrealized losses, which is what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. And now we've got just this massive domino effect. So hopefully, as Jamie Dimon was saying, the dominoes have stopped falling. Of course, that is to be seen. But anyway, it is just kind of crazy to when you look all the way back. Why did this happen? How did this start? It just keeps on going back to that zero interest rate phenomenon during COVID.
And it is interesting to say that the two largest bank failures in U.S. history, both of them were acquired by JP Morgan.
Yeah.
JP Morgan is just such an institution.
Too big to fail.
Jamie Dimon's one of the most powerful people in the world because of the security and the size of JP Morgan. And this is, again, another testament to the fact that how robust they are and the ability for them to come in and acquire this and for people to have a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Just a sense of security about this is big for JP Morgan. I bank with JP Morgan not because of security, but because they have great products. But I think a lot of people are going to be moving to JP Morgan after seeing this.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big concern when Silicon Valley Bank first went under, is that all these regional banks, how are they going to, what was going to be the appeal for depositors rather than going to one of these too big to fail banks? If there's any chance of losing your deposit with a regional bank, why would you keep it there? It seems like that's slowed down. I guess it's still to be seen. But
all the earnings happened for all these regional banks. So the earnings season is going on right now, and a lot of the regional banks were actually reporting really healthy numbers and rather stable deposits. So That's what Jamie Dimon's alluding to, is that the data is there, that this is kind of getting to an end, and this is one of the last dominoes to fall. So we'll see.
Yeah, let's hope so. All right, moving on to our AI Edge segment. So AI Edge, where we give stories, tips, and topics for keeping an edge with artificial intelligence. So, of course, we've been talking all about artificial intelligence news updates on most of our episodes at this point. But really, the point of AI Edge is to really hit on the important stories that we feel are really crucial for keeping up with if you want to maintain an edge with artificial intelligence. So this week's story is about ChatGPT's plugins. If you've seen plugins or know what they do, essentially you can interface with other softwares via ChatGPT and its API, and it can do it automatically. So let's say, for example, you connect it to Wolfram Alpha. You can now use ChatGPT to get verified facts and things like that from different parts of the internet. There's all sorts of different plugins that are coming out, but very few people have access to those plugins right now. So we're starting to see more plugins being developed. Evan, I saw you going back and forth on Twitter with the founder of this new portfolio pilot plugin, which is pretty incredible what it can do. So give us an overview of what it does. I'll play a little bit of the demo that he put out on that tweet, and then just give us any context around what you learned from going back and forth with him.
Yeah, so this is going to be the first verified ChatGPT plugin for finance. So it really allows users, and it democratizes access to information that hedge funds might have access to, models hedge funds have access to. You can search public markets, ETFs, mutual funds, understand everything about them, and then even compare your portfolio. So we'll show a video here of somebody that put in their portfolio and asked for feedback on it. So there's all kinds of things that normal everyday people can do with this. So check this out. If you're watching on YouTube, essentially what's going on here is somebody has copied their portfolio and put it into ChatGPT with this plugin running. It analyzes their portfolio, scrapes the internet about any information they have, runs it through some of the models that hedge funds might use, and then spits out a response and feedback on their portfolio.
Yeah, I want to go back and just hit on some of the stuff that it says here. Well, first off, right up at the beginning, it essentially classifies their current risk level, which I think a lot of people would normally have a hard time doing, understanding truly, objectively, what is the risk level of my portfolio. Describes this portfolio in the example as very aggressive. Then it goes on to say, here are the areas of concern with your portfolio, lacking sufficient diversification across asset classes, countries, and sectors. The exposure to economic growth and commodity prices is critical. I mean, it's basically like you're going through with a wealth advisor, somebody that's an expert on this, except it's done with ChatGPT. And then not only that, but it goes on to say, to improve your portfolio, here's our recommendation engine. Here's what you should do to improve it. So it says things like decrease your holdings of low performers, such as VTI or WMT, and it goes on to just list out how he can mitigate some of those problems with his portfolio. Which I think this is just something that if you extrapolate this, down 3 to 5 years, and everybody has access to something like this, what does that do to the stock market when everyone is interacting with the stock market through something like an artificial intelligence chatbot that is helping them make better decisions? Is that a healthy thing for the stock market? I would assume so. I don't know. Yeah. But it's a pretty crazy thing. And to your point that you tweeted about whenever you first saw this and you quote tweeted it, this is a very a first mover advantage. I forget exactly the words you used, but it is just such a huge advantage to be able to have access to this before anyone else. And like you and I both don't have access to plugins, so it's a very small number of people that are able to access this right now. And to be able to have access to this, you just have a huge head start.
Yeah, I mean, really what's going on here is they're democratizing this information. And so like information arbitrage and misalignment or information arbitrage and basically access to this data is now a lot easier. Information arbitrage is not easier, but it's going to be harder. So maybe pull up my tweet. Let me see see if you can find my tweet real quick.
Keep talking.
Let's pull this up. So essentially the way that I'm thinking of this is what this does to the market overall is it really kind of makes it more efficient. So when you implement a lot more data and people start trading off of that data and it's really good, healthy data, then that makes the market way more efficient. Today, a lot of the automated investment going on in the high frequency trading is done off of technical analysis and like checking what the charts are saying, and basically computers talking to computers about these technical analysis data points. But this is all really kind of qualitative data. And when you have access to that and can connect it to a trading platform, that really is powerful, not only for consumers, but those that are making trades and day trading. So this is really going to be interesting. It's going to make, I think, the model or the market rather much more efficient.
Yeah.
There's going to be less volatility because people have cleaner data. And so let me read what I said here. So information arbitrage and asymmetry are narrowing, which has huge implications for capital allocation and equality in general. So essentially what I'm saying there is traditionally in the capital markets, hedge funds and people that are in the markets day in and day out have a lot more information than normal consumers. So they're making more intelligent bets. They're making more timely bets. They're getting out in front of news faster than consumers. And so consumers are kind of sitting there that do trade, and they're just kind of waiting on things to happen, whereas some people have this information arbitrage getting out in front of them. So that's no longer really going to be as big of a problem. And then kind of asymmetry here is similar. People have access to some information, others don't. And when you open up that information and knowledge to everybody with something like this plugin, again, the market gets way more efficient, and people can make more intelligent decisions. And companies that are healthy, and it's very clear, and the models and these plugins know businesses are healthy, more capital is going to be allocated to them in intelligent manners. So I think it's really good for the markets to open up data like this and have more general availability.
Well, then do you see a future in which hedge funds and wealth managers are replaced by AI models that are able to analyze all of this information, and essentially you start seeing people move their money with the most successful artificial intelligence models?
Yeah. You're in a bad position if all you do is sit there and analyze numbers all day. That's a really vulnerable position to be in right now. So hedge funds, accountants, people that are using spreadsheets are in grave danger over the next 5 years of just being completely replaced.
There's still going to have to be like a human associated with the hedge fund, just for the same reason.
Oh, for sure.
For the same reason that you say you want to have a human lawyer that might be empowered with artificial intelligence, but you still need to have the person for the liability of it and for the trust aspect of it. But hedge funds are not going to be massive companies anymore.
There's always going to be people selling the data and selling what the AI is interpreting and outputting as far as insights. So those people will always be there who take the data that AI is basically outputting and then basically selling that data and making sure that it's safe to put out. But the people that are crunching the numbers and using the spreadsheets all day, they're extremely vulnerable.
For sure. All right. Anything else to add to those stories before moving on?
Nope.
So our tip of the week is actually a very basic one. It's a new feature that's come out with ChatGPT, and I think it's just a good one to keep in mind when during this craze of AI and of ChatGPT. So Evan, this is your tip, so I'll let you talk about it here, but I think it's a good one.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking about this as I was playing with ChatGPT. I was putting in medical information about myself or like an AI health coach. Yeah. So I would, say, here's things about me that you might want to know and give me advice on, how to move forward with my health. And one thing that I was thinking about was who has access to this data. And whenever you put something into ChatGPT, it uses that data to retrain the model at scale across all of the participants in the network. And some companies are now banning ChatGPT on their local networks and on their computers because employees are putting confidential information in ChatGPT, whether it's source code, employee documents, confidential documents, meeting notes from Zoom recordings are going into ChatGPT for summarization, and those recordings might have had confidential news or updates in them. And so it's that kind of stuff that ChatGPT is now taking notice of and building features around. And so now you can toggle off and on OpenAI's ability to save and record that history and retrain their models with. So that's really important so that somebody doesn't have access to that on the other side of the world that might want to know. Samsung was the company that banned it. Many companies are doing this now, but for instance, Samsung employees put something confidential in there, somebody might have had the hunch to ask about confidential Samsung information, and it's just there, and it's trained in the model. So that's something that OpenAI employees would have access to, and potentially anybody that's having access to the model in general through ChatGPT. So just something to consider is think about privacy. I think that is something people just are bad at thinking about because they just want access to social media or access to these other great technologies that need private data about us. But it's just really important as we get more and more intimate, confidential information about ourselves into these models to consider that, because chat interfaces kind of make it easy to share more than you might on social media.
Yep. I think that's it might not be a sexy or exciting tip of the week, but I think it's a really important one. Your privacy and your personal data should be kind of your number one priority when on the internet. So wrapping up that section, we do not have a Spotlight series coming out this Monday, but we have lots of those scheduled. So we're finally getting the hang of doing kind of both at the same time. So expect more of those to be coming out in the coming weeks. Other than that, I hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you next week.